gonna unravel the butterfly, taking the side out that's wound up in the center. We'll unwind that part. And then after that, it should just shake out. It's folded in half. Just make sure it doesn't get tangled up. And then we're gonna thread our needle. So we'll go to the bottom and there's one side that's longer than the other. We'll just take the longer side and put a little bunny ear there. And then that way we can thread the needle. And then what we're gonna do is just slide our needle up towards that where it's folded in half. And then we're ready to start warping. And how we're gonna warp is we're going to be wrapping this warp thread around the loom in a either clockwise or counterclockwise motion. I'm right-handed, so I'm gonna go clockwise. And think of this like a wheel, and we're gonna be adding the spokes to the wheel by going through these openings. We're gonna be wrapping the warp on the front and on the back, so we don't want it tangled up underneath or over the top. So why don't we begin with opening 1. There's 23 openings around. We're gonna start up through the back at 1. And we're gonna pull that up till there's a tail about 1.5 to 2 feet. So we're gonna leave a tail. We'll secure it by putting our index finger behind. And then we're gonna divide it almost in half. At point 13, we're gonna go down through the top to the back. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we're gonna go down here. You'll notice one side of your sphere will look bigger than the other. So let's just double check. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then we're gonna come up at 2. So you'll notice a V. So whatever you do on the back will be mirrored on the front and vice versa. So we're gonna cross over at 14. The other thing that we wanna make sure is that tension is even throughout the warping process. So we'll just make sure that this is held tight and we're holding that part. So there should be a little bit of a spring, not too loose, but not too tight either. And so we're gonna be crossing over at 3. And you'll see there's an X now on the back, so it's getting mirrored again. And then we're gonna go over the top at 15. And we'll just keep wrapping the warp around like that. We're gonna come up at 4 and down at 16. We'll have to lengthen the warp thread, see how it's getting caught. We wanna make sure there's not 2 threads coming up through the loom. We're gonna have to lengthen our thread periodically throughout the warping process. We're gonna come up at 5, down at 17. Come up at 6, down at 18. Come up at 7, down at 19. Come up at 8, down at 20. Come up at 9, down at 21. Come up at 10, down at 22. Come up at 11, down at 23, and come up at 12. And then we're gonna pause for a moment. Now you'll notice that there is a spoke that's missing on your wheel right here where it's coming up. And the same on the back, you're gonna be missing 1 warp thread. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna secure the warp thread on the front first. And we're gonna do that by bringing your warp over where it should go, and you'll notice on the opposite side there's a small triangle. You're going to tuck your needle under that in the middle between the front and the back warps, and you're going to pull the needle towards the direction you just came from. And you'll notice that all the threads will start to draw in towards the center. And then what you're going to do is pick any warp thread on the wheel, and you're going to start to weave over and then under, over and then under. And you can go either in a clockwise rotation or counterclockwise, whichever is more comfortable. For some reason, I'm going to go counterclockwise. I'm going to go over this warp thread and under, over and then under. And then we're just going to do this a couple of times around. I'm still holding the other side of the tail, keeping sure that it stays nice and taut. I'm just going to go around a few times until all the warp threads are secured and in place, and draw towards the center. And then I'm going to go ahead and secure the warp thread by giving it a hitch knot around one of the warp threads. Basically, you're tying a knot around, and you're just doing it twice so it stays in place and stays secure. And I usually tuck this underneath just to get it out of the way, and then cut it right off. Then I'm ready to turn it over. Before I start to complete the last warp thread, because there's a little opening, it's a good time to insert the crystal into the loom. You're going to put it right in between here, the front and the back warps. There's that little opening right here. This is the amethyst. You can put that right in. And then you're going to do a little bunny ear on the other side of the tail. Thread your tapestry needle. And the same thing, there's that little triangle right here. This time you're going to come up in between the crystal and the warp threads, pointing the tapestry needle in the same direction that you came. And the warp threads will start to draw towards the center. Again, you're going to start to weave around in either clockwise or counterclockwise motion. Start any warp. You're going to go over and then under. You'll go around 2 times at least. All right, so I've gone around a few times now, and so I'm going to secure this tail by half hitch knotting a couple of times around one of the warp threads. I'm going to tuck it under in between and come up through just so that the tail stays in the inside of the woven piece, and then I'm going to cut that off. And I'm just going to leave my crystal right where it is. It seems to be where it wants to be. And so I'm going to allow it to rest right there. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my yarn cake. This is an indigo dyed yarn. It actually has 2 different fibers spun together, and this is from 2 different indigo baths. And we don't need the whole length right now. We're just going to grab probably 1/3 or 1/2 of the yarn cake amount. We can just eyeball that. That's enough. We'll just cut that. We're going to fold this piece of yarn almost in half because then it'll be easier to manage. I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail. We're going to thread the needle by using the bunny ear method. And we're going to let the tapestry needle be right there where we folded it in half. So I'll just slide this up. Now it doesn't matter where we start, but we do want to weave the front and the back warps together. So instead of weaving in these circular openings where we warped, we're going to put the weft between these openings, between the spokes. Now, unlike the warp that's under tension, the weft is going to lay where it wants to lay, kind of like a snake sliding through the woods. We're going to leave a bit of a tail. We're going to come up through in between two of the spokes in that opening, and then when we go down, we're going to go between both of the openings down through the back. Right now I'm going clockwise, but you can go counterclockwise. We're going to start to weave in a clockwise or counterclockwise direction, going over the warp on both the front and the back, and then under the warp through the front and the back. Right now, I think that you've gotten to this point. You should really congratulate yourself. That was the most difficult part of the project. Now we're embedding the crystal, so we have to go around the loom between the warp threads with the weft a couple of times before the crystal is secure all the way. The amethyst is great energy healing crystal for intuition, and it also helps to when we're going into the crown chakra as well. So we'll keep weaving in and out, and we're going to start to get into a flow state because we really understand what we're doing now. We're going in and out of the warp threads. We're starting to come around once and wrap the crystal around. It'll be fully secure when we pass around again. So we're starting to come around to where we started, and you'll notice that we will start to go in the opposite direction of what we did before. So if we went over the warp, the first pass, we're going under the warp threads this pass. And so you can kind of see in between by looking in the center of the loom that we're going in a different direction. Now, if that's not the case for you, that's okay. This project will still work. Just keep going. You might have to pass over two of the warps, and that's okay. This is a great project, even if there are imperfections in it. It just adds to the character of the piece. So I'm starting my second pass now. And I'm pushing my warp threads, my yarn down towards the center, the bottoms of the loom. So I'm packing it towards the center. Being able to understand your inner voice is a really wonderful skill that can be developed. We all have it, and it's just a matter of building that muscle and understanding how to hear that inner voice of yours. This is a great project to do. If you want to increase your intuition, your inner wisdom is so powerful. All right, so I'm going to start to go in the other direction because the crystal is sort of hitting the loom at this point. So I'm just going to start to weave around like this. And you can do the same thing. You can change direction through your project. We're working with an organic shape and all the crystals are all different sizes. So you do have to make design decisions and change directions as you go throughout. The warp and the weft have been used in many cultures, parts of the world, and many times to describe, these metaphors of life, with the warp threads being the laws of the world. Things are already predestined. And the weft is our life, our journey through this life. I think that's really interesting way of looking at it. This indigo dye that was used to dye this wool fibers is amazing to me. The dye vat is alive. You can keep it alive for years and it will still dye just as rich. The true dyeing process happens actually as it comes and oxidizes. So it doesn't happen when it's submerged in the water, but when you take it out and it's in the sun and it's being oxidized, that's when it starts to, the dye process actually happens. It's a really, in my mind, a magical dye, and the fact that it comes from a plant and from the earth. What's great about weaving is that you can always undo anything that you've already done. Went in a direction I didn't want it to go in because I was distracted and looked away for a second, so I just undid it. You can always go back and retrace your steps. So what you're going to do is you're going to hide these tails by taking your tapestry needle and bringing it through the two warps in the front and the back. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you're just essentially hiding it there. And then you can cut that off so you won't even see it. And the same with this one. I'm going to use that bunny ear method. That off there. Then we just have one more step. I'm going to position the yarn in a way that's pleasant. I'm going to grab this, the rest some more yarn from the yarn cake. And I've got quite a bit left, so I'm going to double it up this time. And then put the yarn in a bunny ear. You see I have it doubled up, so it's pretty thick right now. I'm just pinching it and it'll still fit through the tapestry needle. And I want the crystal to kind of lay like that, so I'm gonna pick this one as the top one where I'm gonna start. I'm gonna let a little bit of a tail stay here. See right here, it's folded in half, so it's got that little bunny ear there. And I'm gonna just weave around by going through the openings around your wheel or your loom. And this gives it a little added definition. I'm going to go around twice because I like to have the solid shape of the yarn all the way around. Alright, so we've gone all the way around. So I'm just going to bring it back through underneath so it still comes out the same opening. I'm just going to cut that off and tie a knot here. And now it's ready to either hang on its own or be connected to the other weaving kits. There you have it. There's your Ajna weaving kit in Tension Mobile. No two are going to look the same. There's always a differentiation, whether it's a different crystal or a different shape or different types of yarns. There's different breeds of sheep spun in here. There's some natural Navajo Chiro wool that's just a natural color in here. So there's going to be variation, but it should look something like this.